Hi everyone, welcome to the TBR Webinar series. Today, Principal Analyst Ezra Gottheil will be discussing IoT vendor roles. Before we get started, we have a few housekeeping notes. At the bottom of your screens, you'll see a series of buttons. From left to right, you can access slides, audio controls, Q&A, speaker bios, our survey, and social sharing. After the event, you will receive an email with the replay link as well as a link to other TBR webinars. If you have any questions for us, please submit them via the Q&A widget in On24. You may also reach out to us after the event at webinars@tbri.com. Thank you again for joining us, and here's Ezra to the webinar.
Thank you, Sarah, and thank you everyone for attending this webinar on this August day. Today we're going to be talking about the various roles that IoT vendors play in the various arrangements they make, business deals and engagements, and how attending to those roles can help you more precisely target your GTM to the opportunity you face. So what we'll be discussing in overview, and let me give you the gist of the webinar in 3 sentences, just to tell you what we're doing. The business roles taken on by an IoT vendor vary from offering, customer, engagement, project, other players, from one to the other. Understanding what the best role to take, what your relationship is to the context, is a way of making your GTM much more effective and efficient. And it's important to minimize the cost and increase the efficiency of your GTM because of the challenges of an IoT GTM, and we'll be going over all of that. That's familiar territory, but instead of looking at it by the other kinds of fragmentation of the IoT market, we're going to be looking at it by the roles played by the vendors. So we're talking about the go-to-market challenges, the things that make it difficult to cost-effectively sell your IoT capabilities. The IoT stew is the term we've used before, has to do with the fact that almost all IoT solutions are a combination of various different pieces from different vendors. The ecosystem, which is the mesh of vendors of all these different pieces that go into IoT solutions, a much broader and more diverse ecosystem than is typical in IT. And then finally, the implications for the vendor of the various roles. So what exactly do we mean by roles? This is just an overview. We'll be revisiting this at the end of the presentation when we talk about implications. The simplest definition of role is business relationship. Are you a direct seller? Are you a seller to an intermediary? Are you a partner? Are you a custom builder, a prime contractor? Do you deliver a self-sufficient product or service? That is the most clear dictator of the role you'll be playing in each of these engagements. And as I say, this varies by engagement, not simply by the offering or the category of the product or service, but by what role it plays in each, the creation and delivery of each IoT solution. And this has implications for the margins you can expect and the downstream revenue you can anticipate from these engagements, which is critical for evaluating the cost of the GTM against the potential reward of winning the bid. So let's look at the specifics of these types of roles. In delivering whole solutions, you can either be a prime contractor helping your customer achieve a specific IoT solution to solve their problem. Basically, the primary interface in a custom engagement. Or you can be a creator of a relatively self-contained IoT solution, and we're seeing an increasing number of these that delivers the whole solution as a product or as a product in combination with services. Then there's sellers of components, and I think the key here is that we've chosen the term components to include every kind of piece that could go into an IoT solution. So it includes services, it includes professional services, human-delivered services, and computer-delivered services like cloud services. It includes classical software delivered by licensing, subscription, or by whatever means. And of course, it includes hardware, not just the endpoint unique device hardware or gateways, the IoT-specific hardware, but also the general hardware that enables IoT solutions, compute, storage, networking, that sort of stuff. And finally, not finally, there's one more, but a relatively new one, not all that new to the industry, but new to think of it as somewhat separate, is a provider of capability, becoming the standard vendor for a certain kind of component, and remember this includes services, into the buyer organization. This is based on our observation that a lot of the current action and future action in IoT is in a larger number of smaller projects, so that a large enterprise or even a medium-sized enterprise may have multiple IoT projects underway at any given time. They're likely to be starting new ones all along, and if you can become the deliverer of a standard piece, that can build a lot of future business. It's a somewhat new role, and we'll discuss it further. And finally, there's a partnership, which I'm not really going to discuss in detail, but for big IoT contracts, we've seen relationships where the IT vendor partners with their business customer to deliver a solution. They share revenue and profits, as well as working together to create the solution. So that's another business arrangement, one that is not unique to IoT, but more common in IoT than in traditional kinds of IT products and services. So let's briefly review the challenges faced in bringing IoT to market. We've discussed this before, and I'll do this briefly. So you're going to new target audiences for your product and services. IoT, unlike IT, typically involves operations technology, OT personnel, as well as IT personnel and business personnel. This is a challenge to IT-oriented vendors who understand and converse with, speak the language of IT management, and to a certain extent business management, but for whom the individual operations technology may be more challenging. Then there's the fact that in IoT, most of the customers are immature. These may be very mature organizations, a great deal of understanding of the IT situation. They may be very forward-thinking, but IoT creates new challenges, and it takes a while for customers to come to understand them. We have written on IoT maturity, and we regard the highest level of IoT maturity as the ability to create an environment in which the continual distributed innovation in IoT and in other digital transformation-based technologies spread throughout the organization, cross-discipline. That's going to take a lot of companies a long time to get to. I can't think of a large organization you can describe as mature in that way, although there's certainly parts of large organizations that are. Similarly, the ecosystem, the collection of players, vendors, component providers, is also immature. Again, it's not just the usual IT suspects, it's a lot of new suspects coming from the operations technology side of the business, and a lot more. And finally, IoT itself isn't a thing. You can't sell IoT. IoT is a class of solutions and a technique for creating those solutions. So you really have to be much more specific, but then you're going into a very large and diverse set of solutions you're trying to play a role in. More on the IoT GTM challenges. Revenue from an IoT project is often deferred. In some cases, it's explicitly simply defer to the business arrangement is such that the vendor doesn't recognize revenue until the solution is beginning to generate revenue. But far more often, we simply have a monetization scheme that's based on capacity and based on utilization, so that if you are providing storage for an IoT solution, until it's up and running, it's not generating a lot of revenue. Once it's up and running, it starts generating revenue, and the good news is the amount of storage you need for an IoT solution continues to grow almost without bound. So the revenue coming from a capacity-based monetization, from CPU utilization or amount of processing done or number of analyses or any of those things, is one where the tail can be much bigger than the nose, but the nose, the short-term revenue, can be quite small. IoT as a whole is a slow burn. We see the market for IT into IoT at growing at about 23% this year, and likely to grow another % faster in each coming year. So it's an accelerating curve. The eventual rate of spend on IoT-related services is already pretty big and will become very big. So it's not a market you can neglect. But getting there takes time, and that means you want to minimize your current GTM costs. Precision matching is hard, and this relates to the fact that IoT is not one thing, it is not one market, it's a bunch of individual solutions that fit certain parameters, and matching your GTM to the situation is a challenge. So, you don't want to size the GTM so that's much larger than the potential future revenue of the project. GTM has to fit what the customer wants and what the project is about. And finally, and that's what we'll discuss here, the GTM should fit your GTM should fit your role relative to that customer and that project. And getting that right is hard, but it's also worthwhile because it reduces wasted GTM expenditure. It makes your GTM hit the target, increase your likelihood of success, and lower your total GTM costs. Now we're going to talk about something I've talked about before, which is how every IoT solution consists of a number of components from multiple vendors. I originally called this a chain to talk about the value chain, but it's really not a chain. There's no beginning and end. It's really more of a stew. And the metaphor plays out in a number of ways. So we are talking about components. Again, remember that includes services, including prime contractor services, managed services, cloud services, all services. There are different components in any given solution. They come from different vendors. How visible the vendor of the component or the vendor of a component is to the end customer, to the other component providers, varies very much from solution to solution, from business situation to business situation. And what is perhaps more important in terms of being appropriately compensated for the components you're delivering is what value that component delivers, especially in comparison with alternatives, is critical to being adequately compensated your contribution to the stew. And again, we're talking about a wildly diverse set of solutions. These aren't all possible things. They are diverse, but there are certainly patterns that are beginning to emerge. Andy Rhodes at Dell Technologies has said these are not snowflakes. In many cases, they're adaptations. We're getting to the point, I think, where we can begin to write IoT cookbooks, recipe books, examples of IoT solutions. Now, you would never cook exactly to the recipe in IoT. Every situation is different. But you could certainly find solutions to problems that are similar to yours that can be solved in a similar way. So I think it's very diverse, but it is not they're not a bunch of one-offs. Patterns are beginning to emerge in the IoT use case or solution set situation. And where you stand in the stew very much influences your roles with respect to the end customer, with respect to any of the other members of the ecosystem. The stew is a critical feature in knowing what role you're playing. So then let's talk about the ecosystem. Again, something else we have talked about, but worth reminding you because it plays a very important role in this idea of vendor roles. Because these solutions are stews, they're combinations of components from different vendors, the ecosystem, the provider of other components, is of extreme importance. And I think a general GTM strategy for IoT is one where more resources are put into understanding and servicing the ecosystem than would be typical in a new category of applications. For one thing, unlike more traditional kind of horizontal IT applications, there are many, many more solutions, which brings many, many more component vendors to the table. And that makes the ecosystem much broader. It gives you many more potential partners, not just in the formal partnership sense or in partnership with the end customer, but your relationship to other vendors in the ecosystem is often a kind of informal partnership where your offerings complement each other, you can together address a broader market, and you're using each other's contacts into the business world to expand your marketplace. This means cultivating, understanding, researching the ecosystem is more important in IoT than in general. And of course, your role in stew varies from deal to deal, and therefore the role in the ecosystem varies from engagement to engagement. You don't have necessarily the same kind of business relationship with any other given member of the ecosystem. It will vary from deal to deal. So let's talk about some of the new ecosystem players. This is why the ecosystem is larger and more complex. It's not why it's important, but it certainly makes it more of a challenge. We use the term operational technology or operations technology very glibly. It forms a nice complement to IT. IoT becomes the intersection of the two. It's very cute. But they're really two very different things. IT is one somewhat diverse but fairly uniform class of technologies, solutions, business models, et cetera, et cetera. Whereas operation technology is not any one thing. It's a class that varies from specific process, from specific aspect of the physical plant to another, from business to business. It's not one thing. It's very large and very diverse, which means when you bring in OT partners, it's not just another bunch of people like IT with a kind of constrained set of offerings. It's a far more diverse set of offerings, and the total ecosystem is much larger. And then there are specialists in the actual businesses, and verticals is a good way of kind of developing your general business sense, but the IT solutions drill down to specific business processes, and understanding that is critical. This is a place where IT, generally a horizontal kind of, is extremely challenged. So you're looking for specialists to understand specific business processes, a certain kind of manufacturing, a certain kind of distribution, a certain kind of physical plant that can help you bring your components to bear and together can create solutions. And we're looking, unlike most of historical IT, at hardware companies, and we've created the term IHVs, analogous to ISVs, independent hardware vendors. These are companies that are embedding the IoT in their hardware. This can be IoT-specific hardware like sensors that go into other systems, or they can be just the new model of the machine that they've made for many years, that is now IoT enabled, and now their offering includes all the aspects of connectivity and software and all those things, and they now embed technology into their offering, and they become an independent hardware vendor. And they're even geographical local specialists, because again, we're serving many, many very narrow niches, and there may be in a particular area of the world a place where a given vendor services all the X, Y, or Z machines, and that may be an important ecosystem player for you to know about and cultivate to help bring your solution to market. In the ecosystem, you and your ecosystem counterparty all have a variety of roles, and every one of these can cut either way. You can play one role, and the ecosystem partner plays another, counterparty plays another, or vice versa. So when I say customer, you may be a customer of IoT components to help you put together a solution. Either one where you're creating the solution as a package solution vendor or a custom builder, or one in which you want to provide a more complete component. So you're looking for someone to fill out a gap in your offering. On the other hand, for IoT, your ecosystem counterparty may be the customer and you may be the vendor. So they're just simply buy-sell relationships in the ecosystem. They may be a channel for you, you may be a channel for them. You might be a subcontractor for them, or vice versa. They might be a subcontractor for you. But a particular thing you want to do that you don't have the resources for yourself, it may be availability of personnel in a given geographic area, or it may be an area of particular implementation or technology. But there are all kinds of contracting and subcontracting relationships in the world of IoT. Again, you and the counterparty are maybe a component vendor to third parties, and you may want to join your components together as a package, as something can go to market more effectively. There's a lot of roles relating to that. Or you or your counterparty can be a referrer or a referee. You are a door opener, or the other party is a door opener, and they know the business. You convince them that you would be of service to their customers, and you form a business relationship. And finally, there are these partnership arrangements, not the big specific ones with a single customer, but simply, let's go to market together. Let's package our offerings together, that kind of thing. So let's now take a look at what are the implications for these various roles for IT vendors going into the IoT space. So there are really two kinds of solutions provided. They're provided as a packaged off-the-shelf solutions, which vary from how well they're self-contained, vary by how much configuration, customization, integration is required. But they're starting with a relatively whole solution that can be deployed. And then there are custom solutions where basically, yes, you're the solution provider, but what you really are is a vendor of the services to create a solution for the prime contract. Both of these are familiar roles, a packaged one especially if you have an OEM business. And I think it's important to say that none of these roles are really new, but that what IoT does is it makes these roles occur more frequently, in greater variation, and it's important to churn through them relatively quickly, especially because a lot of the IoT deals at this point are relatively small. So these are roles which you can say, oh yeah, I understand that business because of this, and I go forward. And it's true, really, of all of these things. It's a familiar role, providing a familiar go-to-market, whether it be I'm a prime contractor or I've got a product for you to use. And it's a familiar business model. You know, the monetization is clear, the kind of business arrangements are clear. It's not all that new, but picking the right one and knowing when to use it is the key. So let's drill down a little on what are the implications of being a provider of packaged solutions. So a packaged solution, it's very few are set it and forget it. Put it on a shelf, plug it in, and there you go. So you have to provide in one way or another for implementation and deployment and service for the solution. There's a great variation. So if all solutions are a stew, if they're made up of components from several vendors, you're the one selling the packaged solution. How much do you want to tell the customer or potential customer about the components? Now, some component vendors, dates back to Intel Inside or even Dolby, have said, products that have our technology inside them are better. They've created a reason to create that kind of transparency, to validate your solution by the presence of a vendor. Or you may simply don't think there's any advantage to making it clear that you've sourced parts, you've sourced components from other vendors. Packaged solutions have a very positive kind of attribution in terms of both margins and growth, and that's why lots of companies are pursuing them, and lots of IT companies are looking for big other companies to partner with to deliver packaged IoT-based solutions. Being the last one to hand off the product or service to the customer gets you an opportunity to drive margin, the ability to expand from the very visible footprint with the customer to other products, to more utilization of that product in other circumstances. All are very good. The possibility of acquiring a reputation and making the market grow and getting all the benefits of scale are also there. This is clearly an attractive place to be. Identifying the right opportunity and winning in it is difficult, but when you win, it's a good thing. And follow-ons are our future business, so that you can grow the business in the various ways that a packaged solution grows, new markets, new products, etc. Or you can simply be benefiting from expanded utilization and expanded required capacity for what you already sold. Again, a positive. In this space, sourcing, getting the components that make your packaged solution differentiated and superior is key. And sourcing here is basically a task of kind of ecosystem research. How can we find the vendor who can deliver the specific piece that is best for the thing we're putting together? This becomes a critical part of creating a packaged solution. Of course, it would be when you make something, you have to find where you're going to get the parts, but it also relates to your relationship to the IoT ecosystem. The other role you play where you're a deliverer of a solution is as a prime contractor, someone building a custom solution in charge of actual delivery and maintenance and deployment and all that for a solution. And you are the customer contact, and that's your opportunity and also your burden. You must maintain trust. Margins here are probably not as good as a successful packaged product, but still quite good because you are in front of the customer, showing the customer value and getting a justifiable compensation for that. There's lots of potentials for follow-ons, expanding the given offering, doing other similar projects, etc. You have to do this, a very deep knowledge of the specific business process that the IoT solution is addressing. This, I think, is the biggest challenge for IT companies and why they are trying to narrow down on segments of the market to address, because IT is kind of horizontal. You know about IT, your customers, the IT departments know about IT, you know what to sell. Now you're selling, you're helping create a product that interpenetrates the customer business a great deal more than a typical IT solution, and you have to know what's going on so you recommend the right kinds of things so you steer the project toward success. Trust, of course, is essential. It's much more so than even with a packaged product, where basically what you're selling is that the customer trusts that you can deliver what they need. And again, sourcing is critical. Whatever you put into the solution must make it work and be of the best possible quality and fit the requirements of the solution. Now let's look at a couple of the other roles. So component vendors, you make pieces. And again, it's not unfamiliar. Any OEM business is one. One thing to remember, again, a reminder, components include services, just because the word doesn't imply it, but I couldn't come up with a better one. And your go-to-market in the case of a component vendor will be much more focused on the ecosystem than the end customer. The end customer will often not even be aware that you are in the mix, in the stew. This, again, is like the OEM business. You are selling to those who are going to embed your component in the solutions they're going to deliver. Those people creating those solutions are in the ecosystem. So that's where you point GTA. This is a problem I mentioned before in these solutions of getting recognized by the end customer or by the provider of the solution for the value you contribute. And this is in part appropriate R&D, real differentiation, and in part a marketing challenge. You want to be seen as contributing to the success of the overall solution. There are follow-on opportunities here, but they're somewhat less strong than they are when actually engaged with the customer. Here you want your ecosystem partners, those creating and delivering and selling the solutions, to recognize that you are helping them be successful. So as they expand, you can expand. The margins, of course, are somewhat inhibited by the fact that this is a pure B2B play, and there are competitors, and in many cases, some of the components are pretty commoditized. So that's a challenge. As I said, if you worked in OEM, this is not an unfamiliar business model. And as I said, the margins are challenged and the growth is challenged, but you have the opportunity to get some volume here, to use the resources of the ecosystem, and if your product is well differentiated and your marketing is good, there's definitely an upside. But it's not like being in front of the end customer. And finally, let's talk a bit about capability vendors. And I've talked about it before. So the idea is here, what you want to do is become the standard for a given component. And again, component can be services, including implementation services. But the idea is that what we see out in the market is that larger companies have multiple IoT projects underway at any given time. We think the pace at which those projects will be started will increase. They all will generate additional projects, follow-ons, integration projects, and so on. And therefore, rather than selling your component as a solution, as a good component for a given solution, you want to sell your component as a good standard component to be used wherever there is a solution that needs that kind of component. Being the standard inside a large organization is not all that unfamiliar to most vendors, but we're talking here about a large number of smaller, very diverse projects, so that makes it different. So it's not, we're going to be your PC vendor or your server vendor or your networking hardware vendor, or even your SI or development vendor. It's we have a particular kind of component that lends itself to a particular class of IoT solutions, and it makes sense for your organization to standardize on it and support it and disseminate it throughout your organization for reasons of uniformity, interoperability, security, you name it. It's a somewhat challenging sell, and it also doesn't really recognize revenue. As I said, it's not unknown in IT to be a standard, but it's a standard for many more unpredictable kinds of things. So it's a new GTM. You should standardize on us for something that you might not be using now, or you've already chosen another vendor in one or more of your projects. Because of that, the revenue here can be really different. That is to say, you can make a great sale, you can get the commitment or even the contract, and nothing happens until somebody starts using it. The upside is potentially very large. Absolutely built on. You've got to deliver what you promised to deliver and make sure it happens. What you're selling is a long-term relationship, so you can maintain it. Here's a place where marketing can play, where you become known as the provider of a certain kind of commitment. And because the point of this decision may not be at the point of need, it's good to have created a reputation for providing a component. But the growth potential for growth is very large, and the margins are much larger than when you're simply selling a component into a given solution. You basically become the standard. You've demonstrated your value, and you can often demand premium, albeit competitive price for what you're offering. So to wind this up, IoT is complicated. That's not new, and it has a lot of implications. And in this case, the implications are that a finely tuned, efficient GTM strategy requires diverse GTM, a GTM customized to the situation. And one aspect of that situation is your business role in that transaction. And that concludes my presentation. Please, if you have any questions, use the Q&A box to pose them, and we'll be posting a link that will allow you to see this again, or have others in your organization see the webinar. I appreciate your presence. Thank you very much.
All right, everyone, please feel free to reach out to Ezra or send an email to webinars@tbri.com with any follow-up questions. If you have a few moments, please fill out the survey on your screen and let us know what topics you'd like to see us cover in the future. The replay version of the webcast will be available after the event, which you will receive via email, as well as a link to view and register for other TBR webinars. Make sure to join us Wednesday, September 12th for Going Inside Customers' Minds to Predict the Future of Cloud. Thanks for joining, and have a great day.